I'm Sabine Sörgel. I'm a theatre, dance and performance scholar. Yeah, I mean that was on Jamaican dance theatre, and I was still a master student really with Christopher Baum as well. And he was Good University in Mainz, and he had this big project on the Caribbean looking at Derek Walcott's journalism. And because I was just coming back from the 1-year student exchange in the US, I was sort of connecting with Chris on questions of also African American studies at that time, as well as I got really interested in Derek Walcott's work, not just as a journalist, but also the theatre maker and his collaboration with dancers in Trinidad and Tobago. And so reading through his journalism, I became interested in dance in the Caribbean as a sort of oral archive of embodied memory. And it was something that Derek Walcott obviously raised in his essays and his journalistic writing, but because I also always loved dancing, I was doing Just Dance at that time myself, I was really becoming interested in this idea of how can the body itself store memories that go back to different African countries and survive in the Caribbean and in Jamaica, especially for longer than they have survived on the African continent themselves. Yeah, so I mean, the project here at Global Disconnect looks at what I call shadows of globalization. And I'm still sort of really trying to theorize what I mean by shadow, which sort of is a sort of post-Jungian concept in some ways, looking at what is the unconscious of the crises that we are facing in terms of the violence that globalization has brought when we look at colonialism, the discovery of the New World, so-called, as well as global capitalism and the exploitation of resources and the impact that has on climate. So as we know, all these crises are interconnected. But I was interested, or I am interested in this project, why are these crises now breaking out in so many places at the same time? What is that simultaneity about? And in some ways it possibly started around some of the issues with Brexit, because I was living in the UK and the campaign that Nigel Farage, and to some extent also the Tories, were driving around refugees and the sort of propaganda at the same time that Britain was sort of going to celebrate the centenary of the First World War, and sort of looking again at sort of the legacy of the First World War and imperialism alongside this sort of very populist referendum. I just thought there's something there in terms of a shadow or an unconscious history that breaks through and causes this separation. I met one of the local artists here in Munich, Susanne Steinig, and she has a career as a dancer, but she also has a field, or a leg as we say in German, in architecture. And we started talking about the Centre and Global Disconnect and all those debates around restitution of artworks from colonial contexts, and whether they should be brought back to the countries of origin, and all those kind of difficult debates. And she became quite interested in that and said, Sabine, I would like to do a workshop on this topic of give and take, and sort of abstract a little bit from the very concrete example of restitution to what is it like if we give or take an object that is very dear to us. And so we had this idea that maybe we could do this with the fellows as part of a workshop to think about ourselves in those ways. What are the objects that we research and that become very dear to us, and how would we feel if we had to give it up?